Hello, everybody. Hi. I'm Judy Maddox, and this is our wonderful student tech from UNCA. We couldn't do without. I am chair of Western North Carolina Sierra Club. If you do not receive our emails, I would encourage you to go on our website, which is just wncSierraclub.org, and sign up. And you can unsign anytime you want, but it tells you all about these programs, our alerts, and our hikes. So we would love to have you join. Please also like us on Facebook, Instagram, on our website, you name it, like us, okay? All right, so where are we? You just met our partnership with Ollie. How many of you are members of Ollie and come to, well, of course. And we're delighted to have this space for free and advertisement for free, so we love them. There are 3 different levels of Sierra Club. You can become a member at the national level. You will get a beautiful magazine telling you all of our international trips and wonderful stories. This is our state chapter to let you know they work on things, especially over on the east side of the state. In particular, what comes to my mind is cutting down our forests to make chips to ship off to England and the EU to burn up what they consider renewable energy. Is that ridiculous? They think that forest can be cut for renewable energy. Pretty strange. Land acknowledgement, we want to honor with respect our Cherokee ancestors. We are on their land right now, and we are very grateful that they have harbored and sustained our beautiful mountains, our beautiful forests. We have a program every first Wednesday right here in this room, both on Zoom line, as you know, and this is our website down at the bottom I just mentioned. And the next program will be on plastics, the environmental and health problems with plastics, which doesn't surprise you. In November, we are going to do, what are we going to do in November? A program on, thank you, 1 year after Helene. How could I forget that? And the river and what's happening with the river. In January, we'll do another 1 year after, which will be on the forest and the trees. So if you came to our programs a year ago, you'll see 1 year later. In December, we're having a holiday party, December 10th, but at our old host, which is the Unitarian Universalist Congregational Church on Charlotte. Not the first Wednesday, but the second, because they're otherwise, they have a Vespers on the first Wednesday. So, Ed, would you like to come up and tell us about your hike and also the Kids Adventure Club?
Thanks, Judy. I'm Ed Maggart, one of the leaders for adult hikes that we organize and run usually a couple times a month. They're open to everybody. There is no cost. While we always would love for you to be a member of Sierra Club, that's not required either. Our next hike's coming up a week from today. That's September the 10th at Catawba Falls. And they, like many of the areas around here, sustained some damage from Helene. But other than the one staircase that goes to the top of the upper falls, the trail and all the stairs are back in good shape. So we're excited to get back down there. And if you would like to join us, you can see there's my email and phone number. I've still got a couple of spaces left open on this one. Or you can look at the website or just come by and let me know after this is over. And if you get the newsletter and or check the website, you'll see that hikes are on there listed every month. We're hoping to have a couple coming up in October. I also run an outdoor program for younger kids called, because we're all kids at heart, right? Kids Adventure Club. And we specialize in taking young kids, usually upper elementary and middle school kids, outdoors, many of whom don't have the opportunity to visit the outdoors and/or it's not part of their family heritage. So that's an exciting program. We worked with several city centers this summer and took groups of kids outdoors. In about a week and a half, we're starting up our Trailblazer Club, which is part of the Asheville Middle School in Real Life program. So we'll be meeting with kids one afternoon a week for 8 weeks to get them outdoors and hopefully loving it and wanting to take their family and friends and learn some things along the way. Love to have you come on any of the adult hikes. And if you're interested in helping out with Adventure Kids Club, it's pretty simple. Sierra Club does a background check on you, and there's a couple of things you got to read. It probably take you about 45 minutes if you work real slow. And then you don't have to come every time, but whenever it's convenient for you to come join us, we'd love to have you. So again, same email for me and same number as before. Would be happy to tell you more about that and get you involved. Thanks.
How many of you guys have petted a snake? Hello. Yes, well, you're our people. Please do. Okay. For community, these are things that you might be interested. You guys have heard of Save the Woods, the UNCA Woods. How many of you have heard of that? Yes, well, they're asking to wrap the woods in sheets. So if you are interested, this September 6th, a couple of days from now, bring a sheet, and they want to have a chain all around the woods, just like happened in downtown Asheville to save the downtown. September 8th, next Monday, the Tree Protection Task Force, a really outstanding group. September 21st at Pack Square is called Sun Day, focusing on solar. And I think Jane is back here. She's going to bring some ovens that she's created that are going to be powered by the sun. So it'll just be fun to see what you can do with solar. September 27th is the Pride, and if you've never been to it, it is just stunning. Incredible costumes, incredible celebration. So the Blue Ridge Pride at Pack Square. Carolina Mountain Club is always looking for volunteers to help continue to clear the trails. Alert, we're asking you to consider writing a comment against the additional cuts to the U.S. Forest Service. Right across the street is our headquarters for the Southern Research Station, is looking to be closed, as well as the one over above at the Arboretum, the Bend Creek Research Forest, and Coweta. It would eliminate all Western North Carolina U.S. Forest Service and move them to Colorado. So we would be interested to have you contact Representative Edwards, and all you do is just go to edwards.house.gov, and of course the USDA. Okay, rescinding the roadless rule, or was there a question? David, come on up and tell us about the roadless rule.
Hi there, I'm David Reed. I am our Forest Issues Coordinator here for the Pisgah and Nantahala National Forest. At this time, the whole Sierra Club is doing an all-out full court press to try to defend the roadless rule, which protects unroaded and wild areas on our national forest. The Secretary of Agriculture has proposed doing away with this rule, which has been very popular since 2001. It's known as the 2001 roadless rule. So tonight, I'm asking folks here to go to a portal and submit a comment through the portal defending the roadless rule and asking that it not be revoked. Where's Bill? He's got some flyers that he's agreed. If you'll raise your hand if you're willing to do this and just submit a short comment through our portal, he'll give you a flyer. And also, it's going to be on our website as a blog post on the local website, and it's on the North Carolina chapter Sierra Club website. So it's very important that we flood the agency with comments. The deadline is September 19th. They've given us a very short time to submit these comments, but these are all areas that provide for clean water, for recreation, for backcountry recreation that are currently protected administratively by this roadless rule, which means they can't bulldoze in there and build roads and do logging. So these are some of the really precious areas. 123,000 acres on the Pisgah and Nantahala National Forest are protected from logging by this rule. So just a special plea to submit a short comment. It's very easy to use this portal to do so. So thanks.
Our next meeting will be on plastics, the environmental and health impacts of plastic, with Chris Malik and Anna Alsabrook right here. And certainly, I'm sure all of you guys have heard a lot about plastics. And right now, I want to introduce you to our wonderful speaker. Dave Erb has been my friend for 20 years, I guess, a long time. So, 4 decades, Mr. Erb has been in automotive engineering, which began in heavy truck and transit bus industry and ended in academia. Dave has developed vehicles employing gasoline, diesel, biodiesel, alcohol, electric, and hybrid electric power trains. He has just retired from, help me out, Dave, from Mechatronics. Oh, and can I explain to you what mechatronics is? But he was a teacher here at UNCA. So, Mr. Erb.
Thank you. Is this working okay? Good. And yeah, Johnny, thank you. Okay. Yep, we're good. Okay, as Judy said, my name is Dave. My last name is Erb, spelled E-R-B. And I was trained as an aerospace engineer, but I spent my entire career as an automotive engineer, focused primarily on energy and emissions. I started out doing test and development work in the heavy truck and transit bus industry, but most of my career I was a college professor with a consulting practice on the side. I've developed vehicles with all those fuels that Judy mentioned, plus natural gas, which I guess we don't call that anymore. It's fossil methane. But about 3 decades ago, I had a life-altering experience. My students built this car to take to a contest that first ran in Detroit in 1993. It was called HEV Challenge, Hybrid Electric Vehicle Challenge. We ended up getting second place in that contest behind a team that spent 8 times as much money as we did. I was really proud of that. I was even prouder when we went back the next year and won it outright in spite of that budget difference. And even though this was the 3rd EV project I had worked on, this is the first one where I had the data to show me just how compelling the case is for electrification. And so it began my personal transition from being an energy and emissions generalist over to being an EV specialist, which is how I would describe myself for the last 25 years or so. Now, it's been my experience in life that when you tell people things that they're not quite ready to hear, but that they can't refute with facts, they'll push back on you and try to resist your message by attacking your style. And in particular, they'll accuse you of being preachy. So I'm going to deliver a sermon tonight. And if you want to call me preachy, that's kind of the idea. Now, most Sierrans have seen the light. We know that the future is going to be powered by solar energy in its many forms, wind, water, sunshine. But there are forces of darkness out there, and they are working hard to delay the inevitable with lies and deceit. And we need to push back on them. But before we do that, it would pay us to get back to the bedrock, to revisit the data-driven foundations of our faith. But that's not enough. Because there are people here tonight, good people with good intentions, who have placed their faith on shifting sand. And I need to push back on you. And you're going to know it's you when your blood pressure goes up and your body language kind of clamps down and you have this knee-jerk desire to dismiss me as some kind of a heretic. Don't do that. I've studied these issues in a very serious way for over half a century, and I know what I'm talking about. But talking about it's not enough either. We need to act. And my main purpose in being here tonight is to call you to action. Too close?
Too close.
Okay, is that better? Okay, so when it comes to transportation, we are all sinners. Whether directly or indirectly, we consume too much petroleum and we emit too much pollution. And there are many paths to salvation, but we have to remember that we have already reached the land of milk and honey here in North America. And so we need a path that does not lead us back into the wilderness. And that path is straight and narrow. If you look at the data, it is abundantly clear that we need to do four things. First off, we need to reduce our demand for motorized travel as individuals. And there are lots of ways to do that, but all of the good ones boil down to replacing some of our motion with forethought. Second thing we need to do is use our vehicles more productively. And again, there's lots of ways to do it, but the good ones involve matching the vehicle size to the load size a little better than we presently do. The third thing we need to do is electrify the powertrains of our vehicles to the maximum extent that the vehicle mission deems to be reasonable. It's not dictated so much by the vehicle itself as it is by the vehicle mission. And then finally, since most of those missions really want to be highly electrified, we need to get our energy, our electricity, renewably. Now, no well-informed, honest person is arguing with me yet. We run into trouble when we try to take these principles and turn them into priorities and policies moving forward. And that's when the conversation has a tendency to get hijacked by false religion. There's a, whoops. There's a, what happened there? Oh, I'm sorry, I skipped something. If you want to remember these four principles, just picture an e-bike and a solar panel. First commandment says, reduce your demand. You're probably not making 100-mile daily commutes on an e-bike, so you got that one covered. Second commandment says, match your vehicle to its load. An e-bike does that really well. Third commandment says electrify. An e-bike, typical e-bike consumes about 20 watt hours of energy per mile, which is less than a tenth of the energy that a gasoline motor scooter consumes. So this is a tremendously effective application of electrification. And the fourth commandment says renewables. A 200 watt solar panel, which is really pretty small by today's standards, will generate 600 watt hours of electricity per day, year-round average, pretty much anywhere in this country. Here in Western North Carolina, it's more like 900 watt hours a day. So if you exercise your free will and you take these four steps to this level, you'd get a bare minimum, at least 25 miles a day of clean transportation at a very reasonable price, and there's nothing OPEC, nor Donald Trump, nor Joe Biden, nor any other boogeyman you want to put out there can say about it. It's up to you. Now, we run into trouble, though, when we try to take those principles and turn them into policies, because There's a host of progressive people out there who have absolute certainty of things that they hope for, but that they are never going to see because they don't exist. They're not supported by data. And faith is a marvelous thing. I'm told that it can move mountains, but when it's placed in false gods, the best thing you can say about it is that it's wishful thinking. And at its worst, it becomes a particularly stubborn form of ignorant prejudice that is just impervious to facts and logic. So I need to say 4 things tonight, to state 4 truths, even though I know full well some of you are going to refuse to believe me. But first and foremost, I am a teacher, and my faith is in the value of education and the power of education. So I have to try. The first truth is that cars move people more efficiently than transit moves people. The relevant metric is energy intensity. Energy intensity is a lot like fuel mileage, except it's that smaller is better. So to illustrate this, a typical charge-sustaining hybrid, which is the hybrids that don't have plugs on them, like the first versions of the Prius, well, actually some current versions of the Prius, they get about 50 miles per gallon. That's pretty typical. If you turn that number upside down, you can say it consumes a 50th of a gallon per mile. But we want to compare lots of different types of energy. So we need to account for the energy in that gallon of gasoline that the Prius is running on. And we can say that it consumes 674 watt hours per mile. But those are vehicle miles. And VMT, vehicle miles traveled, it's a really useful metric that urban planners and civil engineers make very extensive use of, but it's still 2 steps removed from the fundamental demand for motorized travel that the first commandment talks about. So we need to account for the number of seats in the vehicle and for the load factor, which is our success in filling those seats. And when we do that, we can say that the Prius, if it's carrying just its driver, is consuming 674 watt hours per passenger mile. And if the driver recruits 3 neighbors into a carpool and now there's 4 people in that car, then they're consuming 170 watt hours per passenger mile. You with me on that? Pretty good? Yeah? Okay. Transit buses in this country average a little over 10,000 watt hours per vehicle mile, and they carry a little under 8 passengers on average. And so that works out to 1,340 watt hours per passenger mile. Personal cars and light trucks average about 24 miles per gallon and can carry just under 2 people on average. And so that works out to 844 watt hours per passenger mile. So the average passenger in a personal car or light truck is consuming less than 2/3 of the energy of the average passenger on a transit bus in the U.S. And I know where some of you want to go with this. I know what you want to say. You want to say, Dave, we don't want buses, we want light rail. Don't you listen to NPR? Don't you know that CSX can carry a ton of freight nearly 500 miles on a single gallon of fuel? And the answer is yes, I know that. And it's true. And it's also irrelevant. CSX is in the business of taking hopper cars filled with coal from mines high in the Appalachian Mountains and rolling them downhill to low-lying cities like Cleveland and Baltimore and Norfolk. But there's a reason why people pay really good money to ride ski lifts. Downhill is easy because gravity does most of the work for you. And besides that, I've never met a single soul who's willing to travel in the bottom of a hopper car and sit on a siding for a couple of days while they assemble a longer train. If you look at the rail-based transit modes that we have out there, there's 3 types. Commuter rail is the Amtrak-style passenger trains that run, like New Jersey Transit runs into New York City, Metro runs into Chicago, Caltrain runs in a number of places in California. Light rail is like we have in Charlotte or Salt Lake City or Portland and a whole lot of other places now. Heavy rail is the traditional subway systems like BART out in the Bay Area, the MARTA system down in Atlanta, those sorts of things. And you look at these numbers and your first tendency might be to say, well, rail is obviously more efficient, right? But there's a clue there as to why that's really only a small part of the story, in the fact that commuter rail is the least efficient of those modes. Commuter rail's duty cycle and commuter rail's load factors would imply that it really ought to be just whoops, that's not what I meant to do. It ought to be just a little bit better than heavy rail. And yet it's the worst of the three. And the reason for that has to do with the electrification. Heavy rail and light rail are totally electrified. There's not a system out there that's not purely electric. But commuter rail is still using, in many of the places, a lot of diesel locomotives, just like we use to haul freight. And so that shows up in these efficiency numbers. So let's look at what happens if you electrify the car fleet. It's a reasonable number to anticipate. It would be about 350 watt hours per vehicle mile. And let's keep that same just under 2 passengers per vehicle average. They're probably not going to be used that differently than our present cars are. That gives you better than heavy rail efficiencies, energy intensities, less energy consumption. Now, if a lot of people right now are all stirred up about the fact that the F-150 Lightning and the Escalade IQ and all these we're building these really big honking electric vehicles right now to replace equally big honking gasoline vehicles. And so if, just in the interest of intellectual integrity, I'll say those have about 500 watt hours per vehicle mile. And so you would end up at about 300 for the energy intensity, 300 watt hours per passenger mile for the energy intensity. And so that's a real consideration, but that does not mean that we ought to go to heavy rail. Because the real kicker, the real hard part of public transit is the second commandment. Big vehicles consume a lot of energy. And all vehicles need to be full in order to be really efficient. And so we, here in Asheville, I doubt we have 8 passengers on a bus on average. We would never be able to fill light rail or heavy rail here in Asheville. We just don't have enough people riding it. And so we need the smaller vehicle of the bus in order to be efficient there. I also, just out of orneriness, whatever, will tell you it doesn't have to be Escalades and F-150s. My wife and I have owned 4 EVs. The least efficient of the 4 has averaged 236 watt hours per vehicle mile for the entire time we've owned it. And at that same 1.7 passengers per vehicle average, that's 139 watt hours per passenger mile. There's no way any transit mode will ever touch that number. And this is the least efficient of the 4 EVs we've owned. The reality is we don't use public transit in the US for reasons of vehicle efficiency. In a few cities like San Francisco, New York, we use it for land usage reasons. It takes up less space than having other modes. But in the vast majority of American cities, we use it because it's the most cost-effective way we have of getting all the people who can't drive to all the places they need to go in order for society to function smoothly. And so if those of us who can drive will get on the bus that's already out there, we ride for free as far as the emissions and the energy consumption is concerned, and that's a great thing. But if we're lobbying for a light rail line to rescue us from the traffic jam that we personally cause by living 25 miles from work, let me be real clear about this. The next time you're cursing the traffic, understand that you're the problem. If you weren't there, there'd be less congestion and that traffic would be flowing more smoothly. So if we're looking to be rescued from that, we're doing a bad thing because we're breaking the first commandment by enabling more demand, and we're breaking the second commandment by using a less effective mode for it. The value of transit-oriented development is not the transit vehicles at all. It's the dense multi-use, walkable, bikeable communities that Joe Menikazi was talking about here in this very room a couple months ago. That's the value from the environmental standpoint. It reduces the passenger miles traveled enough to offset the fact that transit uses more energy per passenger mile. Moving on, let me get a quick drink here. There's an old joke that says that coal is a perfect fuel with just two minor exceptions. The first is there's no way to mine it that works good, that works well. Second is there's no way to consume it that works well. Other than that, it's the perfect fuel, right? Now, obviously, what I'm saying is coal is a terrible fuel. It served its purpose in its day, but it's totally obsolete and has no real role today. The only reason we still use it is because for century plus, for 2 centuries, I guess it's been, we've allowed coal operators and coal consumers to externalize the cost of coal, the true costs of coal. And that's allowed them to amass fortunes that they've used to pervert the legal and political systems at every level, from the most local to the international. But we're making progress here. Every time we force them to internalize any more of those costs, we move one step closer to the day when coal is simply going to cease to be an issue. Unfortunately, there are 2 groups that cloud this discussion. The first are the dinosaurs whose walnut-sized brains will not allow them to imagine a modern society that has moved past coal. But I don't worry about them. They'll be extinct soon enough. The group that concerns me are the progressive anti-coal activists, and I should tell you, I'm from Appalachia, coal country. But the anti-coal activists who can't seem to understand that we need to move beyond oil every bit as quickly and every bit as dramatically as we need to move beyond coal. Now, fortunately, we're doing that. Whenever you're talking about vehicle energy consumption or vehicle emissions, you always need to look at the big picture. You need to look at the field to wheels energy cycle. You start at the oil field, the coal field, the corn field, the wind farm, the solar panels on the roof of my house, wherever it is that you're collecting primary energy, and then you follow that energy through all of the conversions that it takes to get out to where the rubber meets the road. And when you do that, what you will find is that the average EV in this country is emitting fewer greenhouse gases than the best conventional vehicle everywhere in the country. And other than those few areas that are shown in the dark blue, the average EV is emitting fewer greenhouse gases than the best charge-sustaining hybrid. Charge-sustaining hybrids are the ones like Priuses that don't have a plug. The best charge-sustaining hybrid in the country that you can get in the country, the average EV is doing better everywhere except those dark blue areas. And the grid data in this map are 3 years out of date. They're from 2022. It would not surprise me if the next time that Union of Concerned Scientists publishes this map, there won't be a single dark blue section on it anywhere. So the good guys are winning. And since we're winning, let's think outside the box. Imagine a day when a Kentucky coal miner buys a Ford F-150 Lightning pickup truck, electric pickup truck, partly because it uses his product, but more importantly, because it's just the best F-150 model that Ford makes. It's the lowest operating cost, the highest performance, and the most comfortable to drive. And he's driving his new truck to work, listening to his favorite radio station, and the talk show host comes on and says, like they always do, how stupid EVs are because they just replace oil with coal and a longer tailpipe. Only this time, because of his new truck, our miner friend doesn't nod his head or say ditto or whatever Fox News people do nowadays. He gets mad. And the next thing you know, the United Mine Workers and the United Auto Workers and the United Steel Workers are boycotting Fox's sponsors because they can't seem to get it through their thick skulls that there's a world of difference between a filthy rich OPEC oil minister and a hard-working American union miner. Let's get the fossil fuel interests squabbling amongst themselves and stabbing each other in the back. Lord knows we environmentalists have done it to ourselves long enough. Now, as long as I'm standing up here stirring up hate and discontent, I'd like to point out that anxiety is a form of mental illness. It's a crippling, debilitating fear that has its roots in irrational thought processes and ignorance. We need to cure it, not brag about it. And I don't have a cure for irrationality. That's my wife, the therapist's department. But the cure for ignorance is experience. And by experience, I do not mean going online, reading everything you can find about electric vehicles, and then deciding that you know enough that you should start a podcast or teach a class, because Lord knows everything out there on the internet must be true, and the great unwashed masses couldn't possibly go find it for themselves. No, when I'm talking about experience, I mean actually living with EVs for a non-trivial period of time before you solidify your opinions of them. Market researchers have had EV drivers under a microscope. And it really doesn't matter whether you're talking about the EV1 25 years ago, or the Mini E 15 years ago, or an Ioniq 5 today. What they will tell you is that experienced EV drivers do not suffer from range anxiety. And that's not just because range anxiety is a fiction which was aggressively pushed into the public narrative in the summer of 2010. This is the copyright application from the original authors of that fiction. The real reason range anxiety is not experienced by experienced EV owners is the way we use vehicles in this country. Back about 25 years ago, Georgia Tech instrumented a whole bunch of cars, and they recorded data on basically every aspect of their operation, minute by minute, for almost 3 years. And those were conventional vehicles, but some research team at the University of Delaware took this amazing data set, and they analyzed it with an eye towards what it would mean for electric vehicle uptake. And there's a tremendous amount of really good information in that study, but I particularly like this graph. The horizontal, whoops, I keep pressing the wrong button. The horizontal axis shows the distance the car traveled in a day, or the vehicle traveled in a day. The vertical axis shows the number of days that per year, it's normalized to a year, number of days per year that the vehicle traveled that far, and then the contour lines are the fraction of the fleet. And so you can, if you interpret that horizontal axis as the range on a single charge of your battery, how far the car can go before you have to charge it again, then the vertical axis becomes the number of days per year that you might have to make an adaptation in your behavior because you're driving an EV instead of an internal combustion vehicle. And so I've just arbitrarily gone in and said people are not very adaptable. People are not flexible. They're only going to be willing to change their behavior 1 day a month, so 12 days a year. That's my horizontal blue line there. But even if people really are that rigid, the short-range version of the current Nissan Leaf, which is a 150-mile car, could have replaced 90% of the vehicles in that study. The Chevy Bolt that I bought back about a year ago for $12,500 in cream puff shape with 20,000 miles on it could have replaced every single one of those cars with days and miles left over. Let's see, where was I going with that? Oh, and this study was published in 2010. So keep in mind what we're saying how we're defining adaptation when we have that interpretation of this axis. We're saying that if you charge at a place that's not your house, that's an adaptation. If you use a public charger, that's an adaptation. And I travel extensively with my EVs. Let me clue you, there's a gazillion public chargers out there. It'll be nice to have more, but you can go anywhere pretty conveniently, anywhere in the country right now, today. And what you do is you go online or on your app on your phone and look at Plug Share, and you find the chargers. And you do a little planning before you take a road trip to a place you've never been before. But believe me, there's plenty of chargers out there. Now, even if you screw up, you're lazy and you don't do your homework and look at Plug Share, you're still not going to be stranded because electricity is everywhere. It's far more common than gasoline. Any electric socket is an EV charger. And in fact, that one right on the floor here will charge most EVs at 4 or 5 miles an hour. It'll put 4 miles or 5 miles of range back in the battery for every hour you're plugged into it. It'll cost you less than a quarter for that hour's worth of electricity. And that electricity is so cheap that Ingalls lets you charge at their chargers, which will put about 20 miles an hour back in, for free. They don't charge any fee. It's a better loss leader for them than giving you a 5 cents a gallon discount on the gas. So you may be, if you fail to do your homework, you may be inconvenienced, you may be uncomfortable, but you're not stranded. Electricity is everywhere. Now, I made a point of mentioning how cheap the electricity was and how little money I spent for my Bolt, because there's a whole host of Judases out there who are constantly talking about their concern for the poor and how sustainability is just this luxury that only rich people can afford, when the fact is they just want their 30 pieces of silver. If you really want cost-effective transportation, you go to a yard sale, you buy a good used bicycle for pennies on the dollar, you ride it down to the transit center and you buy a monthly bus pass for $20. If you're my age, it's $10. And you get as much bang for your transportation buck as anybody in society, and you have one of the lightest environmental footprints. Because remember, the bus is going to be there whether you're on it or not. And so we need to push back on this poor mouthing that people do and have an adult conversation about money. Truly poor people have one of two relationships with cars. Either they don't own them because they don't have the money to buy them in the first place, or they live in a place where they have to have one, and car ownership, the ownership and operation costs are a large part of what keeps them poor. Value-conscious people, regardless of their income levels, don't buy new cars, because that new car smell is the most expensive perfume in the world. It's a luxury item. So what I'm saying here is, if you're buying new cars, even if it's just some bottom feeder like a Mitsubishi Mirage or something on that level, you are rich enough that you can ignore purely utilitarian definitions of value and indulge in that luxury. But here's where this gets really interesting. New cars are the only kind of cars that auto manufacturers manufacture, which means that rich people don't just decide what rich people drive. Rich people decide what every driver drives. There's a whole ecosystem out there that's dedicated to getting us to want new cars. And the enthusiast press plays an outsized, over-powerful role in that ecosystem. These are the publications that made hybrid a dirty word among a huge fraction of enthusiasts who are people who supposedly love advanced automotive technology. And for the last 15 years or so, they've been whining and moaning and citing statistics out of context to argue that EVs are just too expensive. And yet, those very same issues are filled with articles about Ferraris and Lamborghinis and Porsches and Bentleys and McLarens, cars that most of us are never even going to sit in, much less drive or own. And the weirdest thing about this is, other than that Porsche down there, these aren't even mass market products. Most exotic cars are pre-sold to rock stars and venture capitalists before they're even built. The articles about them are how we drum up demand for minivans and Miatas. There's a not so subtle subtext in most of the articles that says, you know, if you just buy that Porsche there, those women will end up in your bed, no extra charge. And you can call that adolescent, you'll be partly right, but if you call it shallow, you are dead wrong. They hire psychologists and data scientists to push buttons that are so deep in the subconscious that most people don't even know they have them. But what we really need to call it is manipulative. And then we need to recognize that manipulation is a tool we can use too. We need to understand that cars are symbols of our aspirations. They're totems of our tribal identity. And that's just as true for the person who buys a refrigerator-white Camry to try to prove that they're somehow above the fray as it is for a person who buys a canary yellow Corvette. And so if we are going to be effective as advocates, we need to be fashion forward. We need to sell the electrified response that lets you slice through traffic like a silent ninja assassin. We need to sell silky, smooth, electric elegance. We need to sell stump-pulling electric torque that kicks sand in the face of those wimpy diesels. But more than anything else, we need to sell family cars powered by American electrons with the American family values that can bring our patriotic sons and daughters home from the Middle East alive and unharmed once and for all. People have an emotional connection to their cars that lets them see their energy consumption, lets them feel it at a gut level that LED lights and better insulation just simply cannot touch. I'm an incurable optimist, and I would never have dared to predict that even 20% of EV owners would also have enough solar to charge their cars. But that number is about 50%, and the percentage is growing even as the absolute number of cars is growing. That's the ultimate virtuous cycle. And make no mistake about it, driving on sunshine is not just the key to moving beyond oil. Solar changes the pricing dynamics in the wholesale electricity markets in a way that reduces and could potentially eliminate the case to continue overbuilding base generation, which is fossil and nukes. Besides that, you can put solar on your roof. You can put it on a parking lot. Unlike biofuels, you can power your car renewably with solar without ever putting mobility and nutrition in competition for resources. This is a crucial issue. Now, cars aren't just economic calculations, but they're not just style statements either. There's a moral dimension to our transportation choices that supersedes finance and fashion. And there comes a time in any moral movement when you either need to take action that's consistent with the values you espouse, or you need to admit that you really don't hold those values. Ken Brain passes the collection plate just about every meeting. And many people here give very generously and repeatedly. But it's still a totally safe bet that we donated far more money to oil companies last year than we did to the Sierra Club. And they took our money, our tithes and offerings, and they used it to buy politicians who are working evil at a rate that is just would have been unimaginable a couple years ago. But in spite of the present president, in spite of the current Congress, in spite of the current North Carolina legislature, we need to understand that governments have already done their part. Through a combination of regulations and incentives, they have jump-started a global EV industry that did not exist 30 years ago in any meaningful way at all. The auto industry is doing its part. You can buy an EV in every size class from skateboards to semi-trucks. The solar industry is doing their part. You can call a local, trustworthy, competent solar company and have them install solar at your house and generate electricity for less than you pay Duke Energy for it. And if you use that electricity to power an EV, it's like buying gas for $1 a gallon. So it's time for us to take a good hard look in the mirror and decide which of those 4 commandments are we going to address first, and then just do it. The ball is in our court, and it is moving really fast, and the time to hit it is now. Thus endeth the lesson. I hope you'll join us for the church picnic in about a week and a half out at the Asheville Outlets on Brevard Road. The Blue Ridge EV Club will be holding our annual fall electric vehicle show. We typically get 80 or so EVs representing 30 or 35 models. There's a ride and drive. There will be dealers there, but this is mostly just private owners who bring their cars. If you've got an EV, we'd love for you to go onto that website right there and sign it up to bring it out and talk to people about it. But for right now, it's time for fellowship. And so here's how you get a hold of me if we don't get to your questions. I'm going to remind everybody that we've got a whole bunch of people out on Zoom. And so we need you to use the microphones if you're asking a question. It doesn't matter how loud your voice is. Okay, we got one microphone. Yeah, we got a microphone on each side here. And so if you'll just get their attention, they will bring a microphone to you. But first off, Ken, why don't you give us a question from Zoom?
Sure. Dave, what are your thoughts on what will happen after the September 30th tax incentives end?
Oh, boy. So the disclaimer, I don't have a crystal ball. I mean, I do have a lot of experience in this, and but if it goes, I've made a lot of bad predictions in my life, so this might be another one of them. But I actually don't expect it to be nearly as big a deal as an awful lot of people think. And part of the reason for that is what happened when the first round of EV incentives, tax credits went away. It didn't go away for everybody. It was just General Motors and Tesla. But part of what happened then leads me to think there's not going to be that big of an effect now. And more importantly, there's a lot of cars that are already not eligible for the tax credits. And so I don't see them raising their prices dramatically to soak up extra money that might be out there. I see them grabbing market share because the auto industry loves market share. Once you get somebody to stop being a Toyota person or a Subaru person or whatever they think of themselves and try a different brand, it's very rare they go back. The auto industry protects its market share and its returning customers a lot. And so I kind of expect that the loss of the tax credit won't be, it'll have an impact, but it won't be as bad as people think. Now, the thing that I am concerned about, and in fact, I'm actually a standing declarant in a lawsuit about this, is the administration pulling funding from infrastructure. more infrastructure is always good. You can travel anywhere you want, but right now, you still have to do a little homework on plug share when you travel with your EV, and more public chargers that are out there in a couple of settings. One being level 2 chargers, medium speed chargers like they have at Ingalls. We need a lot more of those in workplaces so that people who live in apartments can charge when they're at work or at the apartment complexes. So those we really need. And the other thing we need is the level 3, the DC fast chargers that you only use on road trips. But people who don't, again, people who live in an apartment need those chargers to work like gas stations if they don't have charging at home. And where I really want to see a lot more level 3 DC chargers is in the places that are not on the way to anywhere else, that are the end of the road when you go take a vacation, so that they can attract people. And there's 2 reasons for that. One is it'll let people from Atlanta or Asheville, where we have lots of chargers, realize I can go there. But more importantly, the presence of that charger in, the middle of Wyoming, where I'm going to go on vacation, and people seeing, hey, that car that just came into the middle of Wyoming is from Georgia. That makes a big difference in electric vehicle uptake and marketability in all those places where maybe the fraction isn't so high as it is here in Asheville. So that does concern me, the fact that we're losing a lot of that money, at least temporarily. I think we're going to win all these lawsuits, but it's just going to take a bunch of time, and a lot of people are being disrupted. So do we have a question in the room?
I'll do another one over here. One of the questions is that, and I'm going to preface this with a statistic after I ask the question. How do we reach people who are emotionally reacting to what they think are the advantages of keeping a gas-powered car, or who feel like the elimination of coal will impact their job? But the statistic I was going to throw out before you answer that is the fact, in the US, there's 40,000 coal jobs, there's 3.5 million clean energy jobs.
Okay, so
which are we putting out of business right now with current policy?
right, yeah, and I mean, logic is not entering the present situation, but I do have a really kind of fun side note for you. I actually made this presentation and first gave it, 12 years ago, and I went back and revisited it and updated some things about 3 months ago when I knew I was going to be here tonight. But about a month ago, I was driving up through Kentucky, and I actually saw 2 electric vehicles with "coal keeps the lights on" license plates on them. So I really think that this is a good, I dreamed that up 12 years ago, but it's happening. And Thomas Massey, I don't know if y'all know who he is. He's a Freedom Caucus congressman from Kentucky. He drives a Tesla. So, I think there's a lot of hope with that. And yeah, you're always going to be fighting that culture war. But I tell you, I'm from coal country, and there's a lot more people who are not happy about the coal operators than who are. It's just a question of who's bought the politicians.
Okay, I just wanted to make you aware, in downtown Asheville, they have something called a pedal taxi. Do you know what that is?
Oh, yeah.
And then another thing, and I don't know if we can get a petition to do this, why we can't have bicycle stations where you could rent a bicycle and have different places you can drop them off.
I see those a lot of places, but I will tell you, a lot of cities are struggling with that because they tend to get used in pretty wild ways, and I've been nearly run over in Charlotte on multiple occasions by the rental bike, they're scooters, but the rental electric scooters out there. So cities are approaching micromobility, they call it, very cautiously, and rightfully so.
Dave, another question. We hear a lot of things like, solar panels or the batteries from EVs are going to pollute the world and there's no way to get rid of them. Do you have a comment around
Yeah.
how to deal with when those
That's-
questions come up?
That's utter nonsense. Let me see if I can work this. Whoops, that's not what I meant to do. Okay. It's really just utter nonsense. First off, the materials in batteries are way too valuable. We're not going to throw large battery packs in the trash any more than we throw diamond rings in the trash. The reason people throw little teeny AAA batteries in the trash is because there has not been a cost-effective way to recycle them. But if you come out to our event on a week from Sunday, Redwood Materials, which was started by J.B. Strobel, who's one of the real founders of Tesla, unlike the guy who claims he is the founder of Tesla. J.B. Strobel has a company called Redwood Materials that's about recycling battery materials, and they are actually going to be at our show collecting lithium batteries of whatever size you want to bring. So, you know, the infrastructure, now that there are these big car-sized batteries to be recycled instead of just little stuff coming out of personal electronics, it'll get recycled. People may not know this, but the lead acid starter battery that you use for your lights and your horn and your instrument panel and all that in your gasoline car is the most highly recycled product in the industrial world. When they recycle that thing, they shred the case. They have polypropylene cases. They shred the polypropylene, and there's a little bit of that shredder fluff that can't be recycled, but the entire rest of the battery makes its way back into the industrial stream. And the numbers are in the like mid 90% of that material makes it back into the industrial stream. And you may think people recycle aluminum cans, that's less than 50%. So lead acid starter batteries are already like one of the most highly recycled products in the world. So, mics, please.
I remember from 50 years ago hearing a college professor say that Tennessee was the graveyard of cars. And I think you could say that for Appalachia in general. So I wanted your take on the idea that EVs eventually will die in our neighborhood. And is there a potential there to benefit from the recycling of all the materials, including the batteries, particularly in this area?
Let's not localize it. I think in general, I think what are there, 8 billion people in the world now, something like that. Our ability to just throw things away is diminishing drastically because at some point, it gets harder and harder. It's not that you necessarily run out of the material you've been mining. It just gets harder and harder to mine it. Actually, that's the situation with coal right now. It costs a lot to get to coal because the easy stuff has all been stripped away already. So I think we're going to see a lot of things, not just cars, ramping up the recycling. But cars are already highly recycled. I mean, every area has a junkyard that shreds old cars and, you know, turns it into broken glass and metal shreds, and most of the plastic gets thrown away, but I bet that'll change pretty soon too. So, Jerry, you got a question back there?
I have a couple comments. I've been to different places in Latin America and other places in the world, and riding the bus is the norm. And somehow I feel in the US it's become very much of a class thing. And I don't know what we can do about that education-wise or whatever, but it's like embarrassing or something to people. It's so the norm. Professionals, people in suits and ties, whatever. In so many places in the world, it's not. There's no stigma like has happened here. And the other thing I so appreciate in Latin America and many places in other countries, there's colectivos. So there's vans where if you can't afford a cab or you believe in ride sharing, there's plenty of vans available. It's a regular thing, and it seems like Asheville would maybe support that. And for those of us that, for example, want to go to Black Mountain, but we don't want to drive to Black Mountain or what have you. So I don't know if I need to spearhead this or what, but collectivos are awesome.
Yeah, I agree with all those statements. Unless it comes up in a different way, I'll refrain from commenting on the first one. But yeah, and the beauty of the Collectivo is that it's a much smaller vehicle. Now, the reason transit properties don't use the smaller vehicles is because labor is a huge fraction of their expense. And so they'd really rather have the ability to have the vehicle operate at all times of the day, both at night when the loads are small and in rush hour when the loads are large. So, but yeah, the Collectivo, by virtue of being the smaller vehicle, it's easier to keep it full, which is the key to efficiency.
Got another question from online. How do you or the club reconcile that Tesla arguably has the best EVs in the U.S. currently with the damage Musk has done with his Doge work and thus turned off many potential EV buyers from supporting Tesla?
As a Tesla owner, I own presently a Tesla Model 3, which is out in the parking lot and for sale, and for the second reason. And a Chevy Bolt, which is a car I bought a year ago. But as a Tesla owner, I will strongly challenge the notion that Teslas are the best EVs out there. There are way better options out there, and there are a whole lot of them. And so I am selling my Tesla for political reasons. I simply cannot abide that connection anymore. But the reality is I'm going to get a better car when I do. A better car for me. That's the other thing about cars. They're very personal, and what you like is not necessarily what I like. And so when, let's name him, Elon Musk is out there trying to imply that Teslas are so far ahead of everybody in technology, it's just nonsense. It's not true. I guarantee you nobody ever had a General Motors EV with Super Cruise phantom brake on them where you're driving on a totally empty road with nobody around and the car jams on the brakes like a panic stop, which has happened to me in my Tesla. And if somebody had been behind me when that happened, I'd have gotten rear-ended. It was that harsh of a stop, and there was no reason for it. But Super Cruise, which is General Motors' version of that, autonomy thing, and Blue Cruise, which is Ford's, and other companies have it too. I just don't know their brand names. They don't have that problem because Detroit is very conservative, and other car making people who've done it a long time. Silicon Valley is perfectly happy to gamble with your life.
I'll just add a comment or two there. That was probably true 5 years ago, that they were 10 years ago. But if you go out and look at Consumer Reports, Car and Driver, some of the other objective evaluators of electric vehicles, you'll find that Tesla is not at the top from consumer ratings.
Yeah. So I do want to make a little comment, kind of a side comment here. Let me find a couple slides. Well, I'm not finding it, but there's a joke in my world, and it's not really a joke. People have heard Mark Twain probably probably incorrectly, quoted Benjamin Disraeli saying that there's three kinds of lies. There's lies, damned lies, and statistics. Well, the saying in my world is there's three kinds of liars. There's liars, damned liars, and battery suppliers. And battery supplier is a much broader group than you might think. And it includes auto company executives who would have you believe that their greater range than anybody else is because somehow they have this superior technology. Nonsense. It's because if you weighed the battery, it weighs a heck of a lot more, and it has, therefore is able to carry a whole lot more energy. That's the only technological advantage to the batteries of, you know, a number of companies that claim to somehow have the miracle battery. So next question. Oh, here.
Just a comment. My ID4 has vehicle-to-ground capability, and I don't see that. Oh, I'm sorry. My ID4 has vehicle-to-grid capability, which is really used heavily in Europe. And I don't ever see any advertisement after the storm. I didn't have the car yet, but it would have been nice. I have a neighbor who spent a lot of money to put a couple of a battery supply system in. And if I'd had the car, I could have just plugged the car in.
Yeah, the EV Club, we've been focusing a lot of our activity in the last year on promoting exactly the notion you're talking about, and not necessarily vehicle to grid, but vehicle to load, V2L they call it, because there are some cars that you can just, they have the plug on them, and other cars that are pretty easily adapted if you know what you're doing. You just hook an inverter to the traction battery. Our secretary, in fact, you saw a couple pictures you saw his wife out at the Reuter Center up here with her arms out with the 3 leaves and the solar panels. And then their car was also the one that was sitting in the carport with the solar panels on the roof. But Joe, our secretary, powered 5 refrigerator freezers through over a week that Givens Estates was without power in Helene with a really simple home-brewed inverter system that he cooked up. So he didn't need for the car to come from the manufacturer with anything special. He just rigged it up himself. And things like most all the pickups that are out there have outlets in them, including 240 volt outlets in some cases. People did, in fact, do a lot of this work. Sarah, would you like to comment on this? Would you like to get about Land of Skies activities? I'd like you to. Would you give Sarah a mic? You knew you were going to get set up for that.
I'm glad this topic is coming up. So I'm with the Clean Vehicles Coalition, and we specialize in alternative fuels. We partner heavily with the EV Car Club, and we saw this vision too. So once you're into EVs, you know enough about batteries to know that we had a battery on wheels. And we used the moment to bring in a lot of solar equipment that we used to charge our vehicles that then became kind of mobile units to put out in the field, deliver materials, and build solar-powered microgrids. So we brought together with the Car Club like a car show that kind of showed the versatility of the vehicles and the resiliency they have, and we hope to keep doing those kinds of events. But I'm kind of happy to say in this room, the work that we did since Hurricane Helene landed us a $5 million grant from NCDEQ to do solar-powered microgrids on resiliency hubs across Western North Carolina. So it's a big lift, and teaching folks like you how the technology works and where it should go is all part of our next phases.
Thank you.
Land of Sky Regional Council, we're a council of government that serves Buncombe, Madison, Henderson, and Transylvania counties.
Okay, got a question from Ray online. He says, I'm very happy owner for 10 years of a Prius and now need a new one. I'm tempted to get another Prius, but I'm curious to know what, with your experience, your favorite next car would be and why. I'm assuming somewhere in the price range of a new Prius.
Yeah, I mean, there are so many really good options out there. The thing that I'm seeing a whole lot of people buy right now is a Chevy Equinox EV, and even when the tax credit goes away, if Chevy doesn't adjust the price, it's still going to be really well priced for a 319-mile car. And I actually know a whole bunch of people who've bought that car in the last couple months. A lot of people like the Ioniq 5 and 6 from Hyundai. People who are looking at really big vehicles are buying F-150s and Silverados and what else? The Rivians. There are a lot of good options, and so you look at how you're planning to use your vehicle and you find one that fits that.
I would just add a comment to that. We had our 26-year-old grandnephew visiting this week, and he drove my car and kind of was interested. He was thinking it was about time to get a new car. And so we went online, and I was telling him to look for 2-year-old used EVs. So we settled on looking at 2023 EVs. He wanted to spend less than $25,000. He wanted something that had certainly under 30,000 miles that had never been wrecked. And there was a plethora. Ioniq 5s is kind of what he settled on, but there were a number in that 24, 25,000, or even Ioniq 6s, 2-year-olds. So I would encourage somebody to look at 2-year-old cars, because now 2-year-old EVs have good range, 280 to over, 275 to 300 mile range. Whereas if we'd had this conversation 2 or 3 years ago, you would have been stuck with low mileage. So if you're in the market or thinking about a car, think about a 2-year-old or 3-year-old used EV. Some really good deals out there.
Yeah, it's really, used EVs are the bargain. First off, new EVs are not really more expensive than new gas cars. If you're comparing apples to apples, they really aren't that different in price, despite all the statistics taken out of context that you see. And advocates even fall into this trap. When you're comparing the average new car to the average new EV, you're not comparing apples to apples, because the average new EV, until fairly recently, has been a very high-end car. Teslas, Mercedes, Jaguars, expensive cars. And the average new car is a Toyota or a Honda or a Chevy or something like that. So first off, the new cars are not that different in price if you really start looking and find out what you can get them for. But the used cars are the bargain basement deal of the century, and there's 3 reasons for that. One is unfounded optimism. There's a whole lot of people out there who think that the miracle battery is a day away, and they don't want to buy the thing that's going to be obsolete in another day, so they lease the cars. The other thing is unfounded pessimism. There's all this right-wing nonsense out there about how the battery's going to fail in 5,000 miles and you're going to have to spend $50,000 to replace it. And neither of those facts is fact. I mean, neither of those statements is fact. But that people believe it because it's so widespread. And so, again, if they buy the car at all, they lease it instead of buying. And what that means and so EVs get leased at a much higher rate than gasoline cars do. I think, don't quote me on these numbers, but I think it's like 25% of new cars are leased, and about something like 60% of new EVs are leased. And so that means there's a steady supply of very gently used 2- and 3-year-old cars coming out into the used car market, and that depresses the prices. They're the deal of the century. My Bolt is that situation. I paid $12,500 for a cream puff with 20,000 miles on it. It was 4 years, well, it was 3 years old, really. It was 4 model years old. And it was a cream puff for $12,500. So, Larry.
One comment. I leased a Hyundai Ioniq 5. It's like a small SUV. in December because Hyundai had a fantastic deal on leasing. But I was a Subaru Outback owner, 3 Outbacks in a row, and I love the Ioniq 5. The other thing is, Dave, just a suggestion for those people here who do own an EV, tell them what you told me a little while ago about charging. What level to charge the EV to?
Yeah, that I will find a slide for, because I've got some slides that would be good to show.
Well, let's find it. I'll make one comment about batteries. Most people don't realize that EVs in the US now are required to have a 100,000 mile or 8-year warranty. So if your battery fails before that, you're covered by warranty. And research, the anticipation is now that most of the research is that most of the current generation of batteries will likely last 300,000 miles.
Yeah, my rule of thumb is take the EPA range off this window sticker, and as long as, so another little pithy saying in my world is batteries never just die, they're always murdered. And so as long as you don't murder your batteries, as long as you treat them with some sense, my rule of thumb is take the EPA range from the window sticker. And so 300 miles for my Tesla, 260 miles for my Bolt, 82 miles for the car I sold to get my Bolt. Take that number and multiply it by 2,000, and that's about how many miles that battery should last. So, you know, my Bolt, I'm not going to be here when it hits 260 or 520,000 miles rather. You know, I'm not that young anymore. So anyway, to charging, the really important thing to understand is it takes 20 seconds to charge an electric car. It takes 10 to unwind the cord and plug it in, and it takes 10 more to unplug it and wind the cord back up. And in between, you go away and you do something else. So obviously, your time is different from your car's time charging. And so for your car, there's 3 levels, 3 speeds. I think of them as slow, medium, and fast. Level 1, and they depend mostly on where the electricity is coming from. So level 1 is a standard household socket, like that computer's plugged into, like you have all over your house. And I think in terms of miles per hour, how many miles of range can I put back in per hour that the car is plugged in? And so a level 1 charger will give you anywhere from 2 to 7 miles per hour. If you've got a great big honking F-150 Lightning or a Rivian or the, I'm trying to think of what else, the great big Audi SUV, those vehicles will get maybe 2 miles of range per hour plugged in to level 1. The little Chevy Spark EV that I sold a year ago can take that same amount of energy and go about 7 miles. So it's a 7-mile-an-hour car on level 1. So overnight on level 1 is a typical day's driving for most people. And so I actually recommend that if you just bought an EV, don't call the electrician yet. Just use the charger that came with the car, which plugs into any outlet in your house, and see if that's enough. Because in most cases, for most people, it is. Level 2 steps that up. Level 2 is medium speed. And so your source there is 240 volt electricity. It's like your clothes dryer or your oven, your RV hookup, a welder, that's that electricity. And now you're talking about 15 to 40 miles per hour. Actually, it's 15 to 80, but the ones that are over 40 miles an hour are pretty rare. And so you're probably, on the first one, on level 1, most cars are going to be 4 or 5 miles an hour. So an overnight charge is, 40 to 60 miles, something like that. Level 2, 15 to 40 is pretty typical. If you are thinking in terms of 20 or 25 miles an hour, you'll probably never be disappointed. And again, the biggest vehicle on the slowest circuit with 240 volts might only be 15, but there are actually some out there that are 80. There are two situations where neither of those is fast enough. So an overnight charge on level 2 is a full battery, even in a car with a really big battery. There's two situations where that's not fast enough. One is when you live in an apartment and you don't have the ability to charge at home or at work. You can't just leave your car sitting on a charger for 8 or 10 hours. The other is road trips. You don't want to get a motel room because your car needs charging. And so for that, we have DC fast charging, which isn't officially called level 3, but everybody does call it that, and it makes perfect sense to call it that, so that's what I'm going to call it too. And that now, your electric source is industrial strength DC electricity. You can't afford the monthly electric bill, never mind the actual piece of hardware that's the charger. It costs more than your car does. So DC fast charging is purely for public charging. And also, you can't really talk as easily about miles per hour because it depends a lot more now on the specific car, the specific charger, things like that. But if you'll typically get 80% charge, you'll go from 10 to 80% charged on whatever size your battery is in anywhere from 15 to 80 minutes. And that's a pretty typical number. Most cars, you're looking at 30 to 40 minutes to go to 80%. And that's how you charge when you're on a road trip. You don't try to take it full because it has to slow way down as it starts to get full. And so it's better. There's enough chargers out there now. You just charge to 80% and move on to the next charger because it charges a lot faster when it stays away from being full. Am I answering your question, Larry?
The only thing I wanted you to mention is to caution people not to let the battery go to zero.
Yeah.
And, and generally don't try to push it to 100.
Yeah. So you'll hear a lot on the internet about how you shouldn't charge to 100%, and that's true. Most cars let you set the maximum charge level, and on a day-to-day basis, it makes the most sense to charge it to about 80%. And because there is a degradation mechanism that's associated with charging full, but it's a very weak mechanism. It doesn't really do that much damage. The thing that does do a lot of damage is discharging the car really, really far. Now, most cars will prevent you from doing this. They start flashing lights at you. They start talking to you. I had a car that I never did this, but I heard other people talk about it. If you took it low enough, it just quit telling you anything about your battery state of charge. It basically says, you're on your own, buddy. If you want to keep pressing your luck, go ahead, but I'm not telling you anything. I'm not giving you any information. So the car will fight you a little bit when you really try to discharge it, but the deep discharge is a lot more damaging than the high charge. If I'm getting ready to leave on a road trip, I charge to 100% with absolutely no qualms about it. Do we need to stop?
We need to stop, but Mr. Dave Erb, you've been wonderful, and we really appreciate it.
So let me encourage you to come out to Drive Electric Week. We can put my contact information back up if people are interested in talking, and I'll be happy to stay here as long as anybody wants to chat.
And I want to do a real quick announcement for Energy Savers Network. He's looking for volunteers to save the world.
I'm director of Energy Savers Network, and we're a local nonprofit here in Buncombe County trying to help people save on energy. And I see a few volunteers, people who volunteered with us. But come volunteer or check us out online, energysaversnetwork.org. I've got some literature out on the table. We help low-income people save on energy costs, and we're Duke qualified weatherization services provider, so we can get people heat pumps or new heat pump water heater, or people that are qualified. We can really change their lives. And it starts with our volunteers going into the home And so we're really looking for help in that regard. And money helps too.
Outstanding. And I want to invite you to come back next month for plastics and how they affect health and the environment. Thank you all for coming.